Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the October 17th, 2024 meeting of the Planning Board. We call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of September 19th. And Bill, I'm going to ask you to sit for Greg Mahana.
Shell.
Thank you. Any comments on the minutes?
Move to accept.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Abstain. I wasn't here.
Okay. So we have several items on the agenda tonight, one of which is a presentation from some students. And
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we bring them forward to this point in the agenda rather than at the end, if that's...
I'd be happy to
Okay.
second.
okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And then we also have a zoning hearing that is sort of in the middle of our agenda. I was thinking that possibly that could go later in the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we move the consideration for the zoning to the end of the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we have, if I can scroll now that my agenda's out of order. We have a presentation from the Portsmouth High School Student Club, which is affiliated with New Hampshire ACE, which is Architecture, Construction, and Engineering Mentor Program.
Recording in progress.
And now we're recording. An after-school workforce development program. It's online, acementor.org, and we have 3 students to present this evening. If you would like to come up to the podium. We have loaded your presentation, or Peter has. And the students have asked for approximately 15 minutes or so of presentation, and then they'd like to engage the board in questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You?
Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, City Planning Board members. As you already know, this is our team from Portsmouth High School ACE Mentorship Program. My name is Seth.
I'm Kara.
And I'm Nick.
And what my friend Nick here just passed out to all of you is a folder containing 3 pieces of paper. I believe the first one is the print of the project or competition proposal, yes, that ACE gave to the competing schools. And the issue was to design a sustainable facility that can be used to better a community. And so I believe the next one is a story, just giving a little outline of what the building's like, and then the last one is going to be a floor plan. So, there it is.
I can advance the slides for you. Just
Oh, yeah.
stay next.
You can point with that, but you
Yeah.
can't advance.
Right there?
Top button, if you
Okay.
hold it.
Oh, I see. So the project objective is to design a sustainable community for Portsmouth residents to freely use and enjoy. That should be outlined there. And so there were a number of ideas that we could have gone about to solve this. And so we looked at athletics for Portsmouth. You know, there were a lot of kids on this team who are involved in athletics who use the community campus athletic fields very frequently. And we thought that a good addition to that would be a sort of gym recreation center there where we can go after practices for cool down or just while we wait for our teammates or friends that we're helping drive to and from school. And we also added a spot for parents or other people waiting for their children with a cafe and a little book spot if they like to read books. And to cater towards the sustainability aspect of this, we used upcycled shipping containers, and we used a number of sustainability tactics, as in, what is it? Right, the passive solar design out of south-facing windows, floor to ceiling, with the deciduous forest so that it'll lower the cost of energy, fuel use, and thus carbon emissions, catering to that sustainability aspect. And then there's also plenty of opportunity to expand on this sustainability using things like water collection for gray water, and then also putting solar panels on top of the roof, and plenty more after that.
Next.
Can I go to the next one?
I got to figure it out. There.
All right, so we just got a picture from Google Maps there. This is where we're planning on putting it. There's a good spot of forest there, deciduous, so that the passive solar design would work. As you can see, it's right next to the field, as we were talking about, and there's parking space to the right of them. And there's a little walkway, I don't know if you can see it, that goes through the forest to the community campus building facilities itself. So people would be able to get by pretty easily. It's right there, everyone would see it. Be a pretty perfect community spot. I'll pass it to Kara.
Thank you. So what we decided to do was create, as Seth said, a structure out of shipping containers to better the community in a green way. And so with this, we decided to make them, we have a 3D model here in a rectangle fashion so that you can walk around. You have two different shafts that go up. These, as you can see on the sides there, those are rock climbing shafts where you can hook into your harness and climb up and climb down and go back, get a snack indoors. So these are interior floor plans. As you can see, near the top is the south-facing side with a cafe, and on the left top you can see is where you hook into the rock climbing with the shaft on the side. And then on the left side is your lobby where you would walk into the middle, which is the gym. On the bottom, there's more rock climbing on the right, and on the left are locker rooms so you can safely store your things, or if you need to grab anything while you're exercising, you could do that, drop anything off. And then on the right side, you have modernly designed bathrooms. And here for reference in your folder, the last sheet is where you'll find the interior floor plans. Again, with all of the building things mentioned. So the floor plans are area 1 is rock climbing, which would be right on the sides here in the 3D model. And they're raised above grade so that you have some architectural variation within the structure. And harnesses nearby on the left and right for maximum safety. And you also have the two shafts to create that contrast as well and some balance on each side. Area 2, you have your gym and wraparound amenities. Your gym is sitting in the middle, and it's to optimize your health and well-being. So if you just come home from work or on the weekend, you say, I want to have a workout, you can go. Anyone can go. It's accessible to everyone. The cafe is to create a comfortable and calm environment, as you can see at the top right. And along the cafe is the south-facing side. You have your floor-to-ceiling window so you can stare out at the nice fields and see maybe a game of soccer going on or just to sit back and enjoy. And again, you have your lockers at the bottom for your storage and security. And architectural details, you have insulated glass windows to optimize your daylighting and your passive solar design. So you'll save on your heating bill and on your electric bill because you'll have all that excess light streaming in. And your hallways and doors are ADA conformant to create accessibility for all. We measured them in the plans. And here is a 3D rendered walkthrough. So here's the inside of the gym where you have mirrors on the back to reflect to make the space bigger. Your cafe, the green wall, and exercise equipment down below with your lockers on the left. Okay, so now we're going into the interior design. On the left, biggest picture, you have the cafe, where you have additional lights and grills on the windows to protect the glass from the gym use. So if you're playing basketball and you hit the window, it's not going to ruin it, and you'll save on maintenance costs. Your floor-to-ceiling windows will make a seamless interior and exterior transition, so it's like you're sitting outside without having to endure the weather if it's too cold out or too warm out for your liking. And the book nook is in the back, which climbs up to a loft, which stares out to a picture window. So if you don't want to do your ball game or you don't want to play basketball, you could sit and read a book if you're like me and sit in the top and have a nice time. Area 2, the gym, the top left picture, or top right picture. In the top, you could see recessed tube lights to create a clean feel without intruding the space. Floor-to-ceiling mirrors to maximize the space in the back, so you can see everything is reflected. And you also have a wooden back wall to create warmth in a neutral space, because originally we had a gray back wall, and we decided, you know, this is making it sort of bland, so we decided to add some warmth in the space. Area 3 is your bathroom on the bottom right. And we wanted to bring in the exterior into the bathroom, even though it's sort of a smaller space, so we brought in plants and pendant lights to bring feelings of your bright outdoors, and butcher block countertops to bring in feelings of trees. And I'm going to pass it to Nick.
So towards the end of our project time, once we had the whole design figured out, I was able to sit down with one of our mentors who does contracting and formulate a rough schedule based on one of her plans. So we outlined that getting the permits would take about 3 months for this, and we factored in a break for any edits or modifications to the building designs that were approved. For the area, we estimated that surveying would take about 8 weeks, and site utilities such as cutting down trees or terraforming would take another 10 weeks on top of that. To form the base of our building, it would be about 10 weeks, any framework, another 10, and then any of the utilities to make the building really speak for itself would take the last 4 to 6 weeks, leading to a total build time of roughly 6 to 10 months for our structure. And lastly, I was able to formulate a rough budget. This budget was done earlier in the year, so not all the numbers may hold true, but I think the biggest thing that we need to look at is that HVAC would take the most of the money, roughly $300,000, and the shipping containers, the 14 shipping containers that the structure is built out of, will only take about $60,000 of the budget. All of this has factored in variability in the market, so I'd say there's about a 5% buffer in the price, but overall we landed at around $1 million for the total project proposal as it stands currently. Obviously, this is subject to change based on any of your inputs or design requirements that have not been addressed, but we would like for you to use this project that is proposed to move forward and create a space that is truly welcoming and beneficial for the Portsmouth community. And now we would like to answer any questions.
Questions of the presenters? Yes, Jim.
Yes, an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I'd like to start off with saying, and excellent appearance. It's very professional of you. When I was your age, a teacher told me to be good, you have to look good, and I've never forgotten it. So that's just a little commentary. But yeah, my first question would be: I know community campus is a challenging environment, and there's not a lot of buildable space left there. So I'd encourage you to evaluate if this site has any wetlands, because like I said, a lot of community campus is wet, so you just want to make sure the property you build it on is buildable.
Understood. Yeah, during our planning, we weren't able to actually go visit the site where we had proposed, so we just took Google Maps and looked at some of the zoning maps and decided that that would be a good open space, you know, located already next to a football field that kind of fits with the theme of what we wanted to do. So that was not taken into consideration, but definitely will be moving forward. So thank you for that.
Sure. Yep, that's it.
Extremely well done. Excellent presentation. You guys have done a great job. I have a few questions. So did you think about you have doorways and whatnot, but you don't seem to have any pathways or any plan for steps if you need steps and that sort of thing. So, or is it going to be flat to the ground?
So when designing this, we hoped it to be flat to the ground so that stairs would not be an issue and it would be accommodating to anyone, walking or in a wheelchair. So that was part of the reason why we did not include any steps.
How do you insulate the walls and the flat roof? How do you work towards the weather changes, and you don't want snow building up on it, so have you thought down those roads?
Yeah, so we didn't have a lot of time to go through the nitty-gritty, but what our mentors told us was that, a lot of the HVAC would lead to good air circulation, so we had actually planned to have certain ventilation fans located on the roof to keep air circulating, and in the winter to keep heat circulating, so that when everyone is working out, that the environment and the air they breathe is thoroughly filtered and clean, and that heating is done well throughout. And also we factored in a thickness to the shipping containers. So in the drawing that we gave you, there is about a 6-inch thickness that would have insulation in between it, so that it's not just the metal walls on the outside keeping the building.
So that would give you room
Protected
for like electrical and all the other
That is
mechanical
correct.
type components that need to go
Yes.
in. That's all for now. I'll let others ask.
Andrew and then Paul.
You guys crushed it. Really great. So awesome. I like the name of the company, Sportscape. That's also really phenomenal. How do you envision access to this building, or who has access to this building?
So ideally, we would like it to be open to anyone in the community. We want it to be a place where people can, see themselves, get active. We want it to be a place where programs can be held and where community can be built. So we want to make it as low cost as possible so that no matter who you are and where you're from, you have the ability to experience this space. Ideally, we would do some form of fundraising to get the cost down. But, the baseline is this is a space for the community and to build up that sense of belonging, and we are Portsmouth.
So it would be part of the Portsmouth Rec Department, I presume?
Correct.
Yeah, so any membership to there is relatively moderate, and I know that they have a variety of facilities. This would be a great addition to that, and maybe you can ask them about how to structure those memberships. I think they would have some good insights.
Yeah, we will do that going forward. Thank you so much.
Paul, you can.
Thank you. You really impressed me here with something that I've never seen before, and a creative use of shipping containers, these vertical shafts. I'm assuming that's 2 shipping containers stacked end on end?
Correct.
Yeah. You might want to consider if you can get some light in there, or if I could see people rock climbing from outside, something like that. But really, overall, your design is very impressive. The question I have for you is just about this project in total. What was your favorite part about this whole project?
I think
Coming before the board tonight is obviously a
coming
big
before the
moment.
board was definitely a fun experience. It was actually amazing to have this platform and to take, what was an idea in a classroom all the way up to the Portsmouth City Planning Board is truly impressive.
It's the next step in our academic endeavors.
Exactly.
Great.
But I think, in formulating the project, just bouncing ideas off each other and seeing where we could take this with the resources we had, working on our 3D modeling skills and just furthering ourselves in our passions and future endeavors was really an amazing part of this program and this project.
That's great, thanks. Did you 3D print the design model?
Yes.
Yes, that is.
I designed the model, and there were a couple iterations. I think on the original presentation we sent you guys, there was a video of it being printed because it didn't turn out right, so we couldn't use it for the presentation during the competition. so we made do with a video. But I managed to print it on another printer. This is the third iteration.
Well done.
So, there's a lot of learning processes in it, and it's super exciting.
Joe?
Of course, you know that technology exists where you could 3D print the project, the
Yeah.
actual project itself. That's interesting to understand. I'm very impressed with your, not just the design, but your presentation skills tonight. You're very confident in your presentation. You don't appear to be nervous at all. It's really, to me, that's amazing, and I just commend you for it. It's wonderful. So in looking closely at the floor plan, it looks like the containers are creating almost an open courtyard, and then you're doing a traditional roof over them, or, okay.
Correct.
So it's a combination of containers and traditional construction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in the project outline that we were given by ACE, we were only allowed to use shipping containers to create the structure. So we definitely wanted to maximize the space for the community, and seeing that shipping containers themselves are very small, we decided to use them to create a sort of border that we could then roof over to get more out of the materials we were using.
Did you get into the ideas of what that structure would be that would span that distance, and did you get that detailed into the design, or were you just aware that those materials exist and you were relying on, or did you get into the actual material for the spanning of that distance over that courtyard?
We were aware that it would have to be done, but unfortunately, we were not able to thoroughly go through that process before we had to make the initial presentation.
And then lastly, are there any, is there similar projects that exist that were inspiration to this project that you guys are aware of?
Not that I'm aware of personally. I don't know if any of my teammates are aware of anything that exists, but
I feel like a lot of what we came up with was just a big community, achievement, sort of playing into that other community aspect of the challenge.
Well done. Thank you for bringing it to us.
thank you.
Good evening. I would like to comment on Joe's observation that when you're in control of the subject matter, when you're subject matter experts, it's easier to be confident, and you guys killed it in the confidence department. And to Mr. Hewitt's point, it's a question and a comment. Given that it's a city, that it's city property, and you could have the benefit of working with the city recreation staff and the planning staff, would you be open to modifying your design depending on how you could locate it on some pretty challenging landmass, so to speak?
Yeah, we are definitely open to having our design being modified. As I mentioned earlier, we want this to be used as like the framework for a building that could really benefit what we have in Portsmouth in terms of recreation facilities. So we definitely are open to modifications being made to improve on that.
Well, Mr. Chairman, before I give up the microphone, I want to say that one of the reasons to acquire the property and the building and the land was we recognized it was a generational kind of thing, that these opportunities don't happen very often. So it's wonderful to see that you all have a vision for what could also take place on that property. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Make sure you get a plaque on it when we're done with it so you guys can be recognized.
Will do.
All right, good.
I just have one question. Did you have a program for the number of people you were trying to provide the space for?
We did have a plan. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but the architectural code has a certain requirement. So we needed to build in a certain amount of square footage to house a certain number of people, and that was taken into consideration during the planning phase. Unfortunately, I can't remember off the top of my head, but if you would like that number, I can get that number to you.
Well, related to that, if it was wildly successful, is it a modular design that could expand if there were dry land enough, or would you need to build another one beside it or nearby it, do you know?
So we built it out of shipping containers, which obviously you can buy shipping containers from shippers. So the design itself is modular. You could take it apart and add on shipping containers. It would just have to be the welding together of the additional shipping containers to alter the shape if you wanted to have a bigger courtyard, or if you wanted to stack another shipping container on top to make the rock walls bigger. So as we vision it, it could definitely become something modular to be able to house more people due to the nature of the shipping containers we use.
Yes, Tony.
Just two comments. First is great job echoing what everybody else said in terms of your presentation skills. And the second comment is, can next year's class work on a police station?
Good one.
We can see if ACE allows us to do that, if that's required.
Congratulations for taking the time after school to work on this. You did a fantastic job. You did a great job tonight. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Do you want these back?
No, those are for you all to keep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a determination of completeness site plan review. Request of HP2, Boston Portsmouth LLC owner for Hams Realty Services LLC as applicant for property at 1900 Lafayette Road. They were requesting an amended site plan for the addition of new parking area with associated site improvements, including stormwater, landscaping, and lighting. This property is on Assessor's Map 267, Lot 8, and lies in the Gateway Corridor, G1 District. Need a motion for completeness.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Almost. We have just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. I think I am. Don't we have to do the postponement?
No, you already postponed it last month. We're just carrying it over so that people know it's still on the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you like to present?
Hello, my name's John McTighe. I work for TF Moran in Portsmouth. I'm here representing Hams Realty, 1900 Lafayette Road. We're proposing adding addition 22 parking spaces. It brings us up to the maximum parking spaces of 156. Currently, there's 138 spaces. We lose 4 spaces because we're moving the dumpster area. And as we move the dumpster area, we lose 4 spaces, and then we add on the 22 spaces, brings us up to the maximum 102 spaces, 156 spaces. There's an existing businesses here, you know, Atlantic Ortho in the front and the ambulatory surgical center in the back. We won't be adding any additional workspace or office space. There'll be no additional traffic based upon this. There's no additional demand on utilities based upon this. The stormwater, we're talking about putting an underground system to tie into the existing stormwater system, and there'll be no increased flows based upon this design. Currently, there's the open space. We would still fall within the necessary open space. The minimum required is 30%. We're actually providing 39% still. And there's, we don't see any detrimental aspects of the additional 22 spaces that we're adding. Just for an idea of it, currently they are renting 10 spaces off-site in order to accommodate their employees. I can go through the numbers, but they believe they need 156 spaces, all 156 spaces, just to meet the employees and the number of patients that come in each day.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. Questions to the applicant? Yes.
So am I right that you're just shifting the dumpster over? Is that what's happening? Are you moving any enclosure that's with it?
Originally was, yeah, we're shifting the whole dumpster and you know, everything. The dumpster originally was right about where the entrance is to the new parking area. Mm-hmm. So we're sliding that over. That's why we lost some spaces in there.
But it'll still be enclosed as it was.
It'll still be
originally.
enclosed, yes. And it'll still have the landscaping around it. We're moving the, you know, we say we're moving the landscaping, obviously probably replacing the landscaping around it.
Okay, thank you.
Just a point of clarification, you said maximum spaces. It's the maximum without a conditional use permit. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yes?
Could you just elaborate a little bit more on the lighting in your proposal?
The lighting?
The site lighting, you list that there's a landscape and lighting.
Yeah, we turn a couple more pages forward. We are proposing, actually, it shows on that lighting page, it shows the existing that's a little further up. We're proposing one additional light in the parking area to provide for the people that are in the parking area, but it's limited, it's not going off-site, and it's
Great.
adequate for the people that are
Thank you.
using the parking lot.
Thank you.
Any other questions to the applicant? Thank you. We have rules for public hearing. I'll say them once, I'll say them again if anybody wishes to hear them. All comments are directed to me, and you should provide your name and address when you come up to the podium. If you wish, there will be up to 3 rounds of public comment. You can take a seat, sir. If you wish to speak in the second or third round, you must speak in the prior rounds. So if you wish to speak in the second round, you must speak in the first round, and so forth. First round is 3 minutes, second round is 5 minutes, and the third round is a maximum of 5 minutes. If you wish to make a presentation, that's only in the second round. This applies to all the public hearings we have tonight, and with that, I'm going to open the public hearing on this application. Anybody here or on Zoom who wish to speak to, for, or against this application?
We have no one on Zoom.
There's nobody who wishes to speak. I'm going to close the public hearing. Raise your hand if you wish to step up to the podium and close the public hearing. What's the board's pleasure? Findings of fact?
Mr. Chairman, make a motion. Vote to find the site plan application meets the requirements set forth, site plan regulations, section 2.9, evaluation criteria, and adopt the findings of fact as presented.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Would you like to proceed?
Mr. Chairman, vote to grant the amended site plan approval.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're skipping B right
Bear with me a second. My agenda's out of order.
4C, do you want to go to 4C?
now. Next would be new business C, right?
I should have moved this. We have the request of Scott Rafferty as owner to remove 185 Orchard Street from the Historic District. This property is located in Assessor's Map 152, Lot 2-1, and lies within the Historic and General Residence A districts. Who is here to present this application? Is nobody here to present this application?
This was referred from City Council.
But it has a public hearing.
It does have a public hearing. The applicant, or the property owner has,
It's all in writing.
it's all in writing, requested,
Okay.
I can share the,
Well, then we should probably put the map up.
yep. If you recall, this property was subdivided last July. It has a Middle Street address, 15 Lafayette. And it was subdivided last July by the planning board, and now the back property has frontage on Orchard Street. And the new owner is requesting to be removed from the historic district because it has frontage on Orchard Street. No other property on Orchard Street is in the HDC. Really, all the properties that front on Middle Street and Lafayette Road are in the historic district. And so the request is to move this new parcel out of the HDC.
Everyone understand this?
Crystal clear.
So I guess we don't have any questions.
Not so much a question, I just thought I'd make a statement that the reason for the boundary and the way it was drawn was basically to include the first lot all the way down our gateway streets. So when we subdivided it, then I believe the subdivider probably should have requested this at that time, and it didn't happen. So it doesn't change the underlying zoning. I want everyone to understand that it stays in the GRA district. and applies to that. It just doesn't get subject to HGC approval of the look
If
of
it
the
comes out,
building.
right.
So I just want to make sure the public understands that very completely, that if we remove it from the HGC, it does not remove it from its underlining zoning or density requirements.
So to expand on what you just said, if that line existed at the time it was placed in the HDC, it would have stopped and not included this parcel.
Correct. It would have gone around it.
Yes, Jim?
I just want to be clear that the HDC along Lafayette Road and Middle Street is the first property that fronts the street. Is that correct?
Approximately.
It's not a distance, so it's jagged following the first properties?
It's both. It's mostly the first parcel, but it does go roughly 150 feet in places. If you look at the map,
Yep, I'm going to bring it up.
A little jagged.
Let me zoom in a little more. This is the subject.
That's right there.
So right there, you can see where it follows the property lines.
Yep, yep.
But as you go north, you can see where it cuts through the backs of properties.
Some properties,
And
yeah.
that's a distance, I think it's like 150 feet.
When we get down here.
But as you go down here, it does follow, it gets
Property lines.
jagged and follows the lot lines.
Okay, thanks.
does that help? Yes, Paul?
So I can assume that going forward, an application like this to subdivide that the board heard last July would address the fact that the property is in the HDC, and where would the subdivided property end up, in or out, without the applicants requesting a change, right? It would just be part of the...
It would be, the better world would be that we would have brought it up. And just to be clear, it's the HD, not the HDC. The HDC is the commission, it's a
Right,
historic
right, it's the
district.
HD.
Yeah, I did it too, so.
I have it on the brain, too.
But yes, the historic district question should have come up for this conversation, but it's such a simple subdivision. It wasn't
Right.
thought of.
And had it at the time, it would have.
It has to go to the council for recommendation. It's not something the planning board can do of its own volition.
But you could send the council a recommendation based off of a subdivision.
Thank you.
Chairman?
Yes.
Just to elaborate a little bit more on what Council Moreau was saying, she was absolutely correct in saying that when, and I remember having these discussions 15 years ago when we were moving lines around or considering it back when I was on the HTC. The intent was all about enhancing and protecting Lafayette Road and the Gateway. The other thing that makes this very unique is this is very far back, probably the furthest far back from Lafayette of all of the, so there's zero impact at all to Lafayette Road with this change.
And it will front on, if it's developed, it will front on Orchard, not,
And be the only, yeah.
Right.
That seems very logical to me, the request.
and by the way, this is sort of, I'm treating this as like questions to the applicant, who's the Peter. So, go ahead.
Yeah, I seem to recall this time when we were going through this and the challenges we were having with the previous zoning ordinance, and that, I mean, it would make sense to follow the property lines, but in some areas of the city, you get such small properties, there was a fear of combining lots, for the purposes of someone pulling their house back from the street and changing the character of the street. So in order to protect that, they went depth in some areas, and where lots are really deep, like there, you just say, well, let's just go to the back of that next lot. But so I think this is still all in cohesiveness of what the goal was before, and I think what we want as a city today. That's a commentary, it's not a question.
To dovetail off that, I think this is such a Portsmouth conversation too, and we have so many unique scenarios where we have to use discretion. My only pondering is, are we setting precedent that would happen elsewhere within the city? And I'm not familiar enough to identify a certain property, but do we have any knowledge of that?
I don't. As I've said many times, I think zoning changes should occur on rear lot lines typically and not across the street. Without this change, you'd have a historic district. This would be the only historic district property fronting on Orchard Street.
Yeah.
Its neighbors on across the street and beside it would not be in the historic district,
Right.
which is
Strange.
illogical to me.
Well, it also makes for a very awkward, because the context, what would the
Right.
context be,
All right.
right? But when you were focusing in on that line, I noticed there were a few properties that had just a sliver of their lot within the HTC as a result of that line just being, an offset distance rather than a lot line. What does that then mean if someone is making an alteration to a property that has just a tiny little corner of their property within the HTC?
I think the district has to cross the structure.
Right.
There's a provision in the ordinance that allows the planning board to make that determination
And
too.
in some cases, it might be that it's crossing a little piece of the structure,
Right, I think if
which
it's,
is really kind of,
Yeah.
so I would imagine, Andrew, when you were asking are there other, I see about a half a dozen potential requests to make some corrections on lot lines as well that we might see, just to clean it up.
We need another overlay with buildings, I think, to really look at it in detail. But that's beyond this, yes, Bill.
The driver is that there's a sewer system going in on Orchard. So unless that circumstance would apply to one of the other properties, it really is not going to be a follow the leader. It's really the sewer system on Orchard that's driving that area.
Any more questions of Mr. Applicant?
Mr. Chairman, would you like a motion?
Well, I got to open the public hearing.
All right, I'm sorry.
Is there anybody here or on Zoom who'd like to speak to, for, or against this application? We did have some public comment. That is in the record. Nobody? Anybody on Zoom?
nobody.
There's nobody wishes to speak to, for, or against this application. I'm going to close the public hearing. Now, would you
Mr.
like to?
Chairman?
Yes.
I recommend the city council remove 185 Orchard Street from the historic district.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I've got out of order again. That's done.
Are we doing the sidewalk beforehand?
We on to Russell Street?
What about the
Unless
sidewalk
you have
easements?
165
Sidewalk.
Bartlett.
By shifting our agenda around, I'm completely confusing myself, so I apologize for that. We have sidewalk, referral from City Council, sidewalk easements and property 177 and 165 Bartlett Street. Planning Department recommendation to accept these temporary construction easements.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. We have 2 Russell Street requesting a second one-year extension of the site plan approval through December 15th, 2025. Who is here to present this request?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Attorney John Lyons. I represent Port Harbor Land, the developer of the 2 Russell Street project. With me, I also have Ryan Plummer, one of the partners from 2 International, this evening. We're asking for an additional one-year extension of the site plan approval you were kind enough to provide to us. I would note that as to the subdivision approval we received from you, we met all of those deadlines that were expired in June of this year. That included providing 3 quitclaim deeds to the city for the realignment of Russell and Deer Streets and the future construction of a potential roundabout at Market and Russell Streets. As part of this process, I know you received a memo from the Planning Department. As part of this process, we were required to go before TAC. We had our presentation. I think that was on October 8th. It's in the memo. TAC has supported this second requested extension and supported the application. I'm sure you're familiar with the particular lot that's at issue. Given some of the unique natures of that parcel, it's required some additional planning, realignment of Russell and Deer Streets, the proximity to the railroad, the relocation of utility easements, ledge removal. We're also asking for a parking variance given the second building, the middle building, its unique design. We've applied for a variance and we have a hearing before the ZBA on that. We have a number of we're going to be working with the city shortly as well to complete the community space easement so we can get that behind us. But we just need this additional one-year extension given all of those unique aspects. You also provided us with approval of 2 conditional use permits. We're going to have to reapply separately for those. I'll be filing those by October 30th, so we'll be back in front of you as to those approvals. So I don't know if anyone has any questions, but we're asking for an additional one-year extension of your site plan approval.
Questions of the applicant? Yes, Andrew.
Just for clarity's sake for the public and us, I suppose, the CUPs expire in December of this year.
Correct.
Okay.
And we couldn't combine it,
Yeah.
so we had to do it separate. So we had to ask for this request, and then we'll reapply for the CUP approvals.
Any other questions? It's a public hearing, correct? No.
No.
No. Okay.
Only.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Take a motion.
Yes, please.
Mr. Chairman, I vote to grant a second one-year extension of the site plan to December 15, 2025.
Second?
Any discussion? Yes, Jim.
Yeah, I'm going to be voting no again because I voted no on the first extension. I voted no on the original application. I still don't agree with allowing driveways and fire lanes for community space.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Thank you. G-Nod, correct? Yep. We have a zoning hearing, proposed ordinance amending Chapter 10, Article 6, Overlay Districts, Section 10.680, Gateway Neighborhood Overlay District, you may hear tonight referred to as the G-Nod, by establishing a new incentive overlay district allowing for higher density housing. The affected parcels are listed on the assessor's map lot, and I'm going to read them in blocks. 213, sheet 213, parcels 1, 2, 11, and 12, followed all by zeros. A portion of sheet 214, parcel 3, sheet 216, parcel 11, 12, 14, 15, 18, 18A, 19, 110, and 111, and sheet 10, or sheet 217, parcel 2-1819, and sheet 217, parcel 2-1975. Peter has a presentation for us to explain this a little bit.
Too many tools. There.
You just
All
made
right.
it big, yep.
Yeah. Okay, yes. This is the Gateway Neighborhood Overlay District, also known as the G-Nod. It is an overlay that incorporates Article 5B, which is the gateway zoning, with some exemptions and some changes that will hopefully create opportunities for higher density housing and additional workforce housing opportunities. This is kind of a pilot area that could be expanded to other areas of the city as an overlay. The initial area is along Commerce Way and Portsmouth Boulevard. This area was considered for rezoning by the Land Use Committee a couple years ago and also recently by the Housing Committee. The Housing Committee at their September meeting voted to support the adoption of this overlay. I have the Places to Live dialogue on here just to bring up that effort that was held in January, where over 100 people were in study groups, and they spoke about reducing barriers to zoning, looking at other areas that don't currently allow housing to allow housing in higher densities and taller buildings. This slide is a comparison slide of the current gateway requirements and what proposed changes are in the gateway overlay. So the first one is building length. Currently in the gateway there's a 200-foot maximum building length, and in the proposed overlay that is increased to 400 feet. Relevant setbacks, so I've included apartment buildings and mixed-use buildings because those would be what would be built most likely. Apartment buildings have a 10 to 30-foot max front yard, 15-foot side yard minimum, and 20-foot rear yard minimum. Mixed-use buildings have a 0 to 50-foot maximum front yard and also a 15-foot side and 20-foot rear minimum. And the proposal is to allow all setbacks be 10 feet. Building coverage currently in the gateway for residential developments, it's 50% max, and for mixed use, it's 70%. And the proposal is to allow 75% maximum building coverage. For open space, currently both in residential and mixed-use developments, there's a 20% minimum open space requirement. In the proposed ordinance, it's 10%. And for community space, currently it's broken down by Gateway 1 and Gateway 2. In Gateway 1, it's a 10% minimum, and in Gateway 2, it's a 20% minimum, and the proposed ordinance is 10%. Residential density in the current gateway per acre, it's currently 16 units per acre by right, and then with a conditional use permit, it's 24 units. And in the proposed overlay, there's no requirement for this dwelling units per acre standard. For workforce housing, currently, there are different incentives in the gateway district for dwelling units per building, dwelling units per acre, building height and footprint. And if you get one of those incentives, you have to do workforce housing. If you do multiple incentives, you have to do both workforce housing and public realm improvements. And so currently, it's just you have to build 20% of the units as workforce housing units. In this new overlay district, there's the same requirement for 20% of the units, but then there are also two other options, a payment in lieu of, and then a land transfer option. And I'll go into those a little bit more in a minute. There are some sections that are proposed to be exempt with the gateway overlay. And one is building step back, which is if you have a certain right-of-way width, the buildings have to step back in height. And then building setbacks and separation. Currently, it requires 10-foot setback between buildings. This is proposed to not apply. However, they'll still need to comply with the International Building Code. Special setback on Lafayette Road and Route 1 bypass. This area is currently not in the proposed area is not within this area, so it's proposed to be exempt from this requirement. Additionally, building placement and orientation. This relates to building within the front lot line and also deals with facade orientation. As I mentioned before, residential density doesn't apply for the dwelling units per acre. And then location of vehicular use facilities. So this is setbacks from lot lines for parking facilities on a lot. Also proposed is to not require a conditional use permit for shared parking on separate lots, but just to allow it by right. So if you have multiple lots, you can have a shared parking between those lots without having to get a conditional use permit. This table might be hard to see from here, but this breaks down the different density bonus incentives for the GNOD. And so currently you can build, in the Gateway, you can build 4-story building with 24 units per building in an apartment building. And that applies to this as well. If you want to build 5 stories or 68 feet and 80 units, you could do so, but you would have to provide public realm improvements, which as outlined in the current Gateway District. And that would be an administrative approval through the director of the planning department. And then if you want to go higher, 6 stories or 80 feet, and up to 120 units per building, that brings in the workforce housing requirement, where you can either provide the workforce housing within the development, do a payment in lieu of, or a land transfer. And providing the workforce housing and payment in lieu of, that is through a conditional use permit through the planning board. And then the land transfer option, if that was, if you went with that option, that would go through the city council approval. And just back to that, for every 20 acres of land within that's developed as a part of a Gateway Neighborhood Overlay development, you have to donate 1 acre of developable land that's acceptable to the city council. So at that time, we can take any questions or go back. I know I went through that kind of quickly.
Okay, before the public hearing, these questions at this point, I'd like to keep to just technical questions about the presentation. The substantive discussion about the proposal, we should wait for the public hearing. Not that there's a big crowd, but yes, Tony.
Peter, can you go back to the right-of-way slide?
Yep.
Well, you could probably
Oh, yeah,
answer.
yeah, yeah.
You might not even need the slide. Is the right-of-way, this is a civil engineering question for the city, is that a street handed over to the city, or is that a road on their property that the development owns?
The step back?
Yes.
Let me just, I don't have it memorized, so let me. Sure. It relates to the width of a right-of-way. I think if it's like public street, if it's a 35-foot or up to 60-foot, there are certain setbacks. But I'll find that and pull it up for you. Actually, easier to. I had the ordinance open. And it has a graphic. So here's the. Oops.
You haven't shared this screen yet.
Let me share the screen.
There you go.
There you go. So if you have a.
Can you zoom in?
Yep. So if the building's taller than 35 feet with a right-of-way 60 feet or less, the building shall be set back or step back from the right-of-way line in accordance with this figure. So
That would imply a public street, not a internal access road.
Right, or
Public
driveway,
street,
right, yep.
Well, Peter, wait a minute. Isn't that one of the sections that's excluded?
Yes.
Yeah. So this would not.
Right, this would not apply.
This would not apply to the GNOD.
Okay. Even better.
So, want folks clear on that. This is something that's existing today, but with
Right,
GNOD it would not apply.
Those sections I went through were exempt. I was just telling you what was exempt from the Gateway Neighborhood Overlay that is currently in the Gateway District.
Yes, Paul.
Peter, can you expand on the the payment in lieu of for workforce housing and what that calculation looks like and
Good question.
how
because-
might that money be used to address the
Right,
needs?
so
of-
currently, there is no formula or calculation. That's, in the ordinance, it's proposed to be established by the fee committee on an annual basis, so it might change every year. Staff is looking into options and kind of formulas. We have, if you remember the RKG report, they had a formula for computing the payment in lieu of. We've looked at other localities. They range from, $35,000 to $100,000 per unit, but that fee hasn't been set yet. But ideally, it would be per unit, or you could do a combination of, say you build 10 units, but you can't build the other 5. You could maybe do a payment in lieu of for those additional ones, but we haven't set the fee yet.
But it will get.
Right.
It has to be.
Yep.
It's part of the.
There'll have to be a fee committee meeting if it actually gets passed.
You on that?
I am.
Jim?
Mr. Chair, I have questions in general about the surrounding properties, the zoning, things like that. Should I ask that now or later?
Sounds like a general question. I think the public hearing might be fairly quick, but we'll see. Maybe not. But I think we should do that before we get into the substantive, so we can incorporate the public's comments into our substantive discussion. This was just the technical questions of the presentation, or a technical question relating to what does this mean in this section.
Okay.
It sounds like you've got strategic questions. Yes, Bill?
I'd like to understand the city council approval on the land transfer. What engagement does the planning board have in that process?
Make a recommendation, and then the council makes a decision. Any other technical questions? Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. Same rules I said before. Is anybody here on Zoom wishes to speak to, for, or against this proposal? This is the button, right?
Thank you. Should I start? Good evening, Elizabeth Bratter, property owner, 159 McDonough Street. I will be speaking twice. I'm presenting 2 charts to you. One is a quick comparison of dimensional standards of office research, which is what the area is currently zoned, versus the GNOD, and the 3 different incentives which can be used. The second is a list of uses for the office research versus the additional unbridled uses in GNOD. The GNOD can be used without employing any of the incentives. It allows the height of 50 feet, 24 units per building, 400 feet of frontage, 75 feet of building coverage, a minimum of 10% open space, and 10 feet setbacks on the side, rear, and front of the building. The 20% workforce housing incentive allows for a height increase from 50 to 80 feet. It includes large increase in housing units from 24 per building to 25 to 120. The realm incentive allows for a height increase of 50 to 68 feet, very odd number. There is a slightly smaller increase in housing units when using the realm. That starts at 24 for the GNOD, and then you can have anywhere from 25 to 80 units if you use the realm incentive. The final incentive is a land transfer. It allows the same number of units as buildings that are allowed for workforce housing, with the incentive of the GNOD being 24 units and the housing one being 25 to 120 per building. The most disturbing dimensional standard is the decrease in minimum yard setbacks from 30, 73, and 30 feet for the office research to 10 feet respectively. This means that a 50 to 80 foot building can be within 10 feet of a GRB or G1's property line. As stated by some planning board members at previous meetings, it is not the height that is the issue. It is the setback to the property line. The second page is the most allowed uses for office research and a list of 7 added uses to be allowed by right in GNOD. GNOD does not have any restrictions for retail sales having to be within a building, and there are no occupancy restrictions for restaurants or function rooms. The dimensions allowed will yield very large buildings, which could easily house restaurants or functions rooms with occupancy rate, of more than 500 people. You only need 5,000 square feet, which is 400 times 12.5. The impact of this could have negative impacts on neighbors who would live a mere 10 feet away. Please review the two charts carefully and imagine yourself living next to Office Research, which is 307330 for setbacks and buildings of 60 feet, and GNOD with 80-foot buildings and 10-foot setbacks. Office Research has a maximum size for hotels of 125 rooms, and GNOD has no limit on functions or function rooms, and they have shared parking. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other first-round speakers? Anybody on Zoom? Second-round speakers?
10 minutes, right?
5. If you do 2, then we can press that.
It says 3. Elizabeth Bratter, 159 McDonough Street again. This overlay is a great idea, and there are concerns regarding how many people on the planning board helped to write it and will be voting for something they developed. Human nature doesn't see pitfalls in something one has been personally involved in. Reviewing the details of GNOD, there are important aspects for neighbors which have not been considered. There are many aspects of climate change, and there is the concern that since this overlay district can be used without engaging in any incentives, there could be no yield of workforce housing or other, just as happened with other overlays or incentives. The lots of this overlay are going over open lands and wetlands that were there not too long ago. How much fill and what kind was put into them? Can they handle 80-foot structures? The substantial increase from 30 to 75 feet of building coverage and the sharp decrease in open space from 30% to a mere 10% should be reconsidered. Often open space is filled with stone sidewalks or sitting areas or large grassy areas which are watered along with the pavement and the irrigation system which runs on rainy days. If you drive down Commerce Way, notice how big the buildings already are. Why not just allow for the conversion of the residential to residential with no increase in footprint? Any changes beyond what is already there should require one of the 3 incentives. Providing GNOD with no required use of incentives is the same stuff, different day. Please do not allow this to happen. It might be helpful for a developer to just ask for a variance to allow residential in an OR building. It would yield a much more pleasant place to live. The setbacks in building coverage and open space would keep their residents away from industrial areas and out of the neighbors' backyards. Please consider the public comments that I submitted that show you that some of these lots back right up to the Schiller properties, and some of these back right up to GRB homes, which would have 60-foot or 80-foot high buildings within 10 feet of their lot line. How would you feel if you were asked to live next to a Schiller property? And should workforce housing be built in these areas where you might not want to live? This overlay has many great concepts and has been well written, but the setbacks, the lack of limits on occupancy for restaurants and function halls, and including lots which should not be zoned residential at all due to their proximity to highly industrial areas, should be addressed before this moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other second-round speakers?
Have any other first rounders? It can't be. We didn't have any other
That's
first
right.
rounders.
There can't be. Are there any third-round speakers? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Thank you. Jim, you had...
Yes, thank you. I have questions about the surrounding properties. Let's start with the Schiller properties. They're zoned waterfront industrial. And obviously there was a power plant, PSNH, then Eversource, and I think Granite Shore Power owns it now. And I understand there was 3 50-megawatt boilers. One was wood-fired, but those are all shut down?
Yes.
There's no power being
I
generated
believe there is some peak power that's generated at Granite Shore, one of the buildings there.
Okay. All right, so we still have an active power plant next to this property then? Is that accurate?
Sounds like it for peak, yep.
It's my understanding at peak times they can activate that site.
All right, so All right, that's one question, I guess, and which, leads me to believe typically good planning practices is not to create new residential next to industrial lands. We had that issue with the Pike property and the Ritchie property about a year ago, I guess. So that's kind of something that concerns me somewhat. And as far as the 16 properties, can Peter confirm that they're all office research now except the one Osprey Drive is GRB?
That's correct.
Okay, so GRB is, One Osprey Drive is pretty small, and if we allow this zoning, there could be an 80-foot property, 80-foot high building right smack dab in the middle of that Osprey development. So that one property gives me a little heartburn as far as including it into all these other office research properties. And then I guess lastly, while I still have the floor, could someone explain how this zoning change relates to the lawsuit with Michael Cain?
Maybe we can invite the city attorney down to do that.
Well, the deputy city attorney is approaching the microphone. He's probably the best person to answer that.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Board, Member Hewitt. To answer your question, how this relates to the lawsuit, City Attorney Morrill did explain this in some detail when this was brought public, but I'm happy to present the facts to this board. This zoning change really did start with the Housing Committee when they first considered rezoning many of these properties to be within the gateway. Subsequent to that conversation, the city and Sobo Square were involved in court-mandated mediation. Coming out of that mediation, city staff engaged in conversations with representatives of the Cain Company about potential rezoning of these properties, starting, using as a starting point gateway zoning, and that's why this ordinance that you all have in front of you now is a version of gateway zoning, right? It takes gateway zoning and then modifies it to provide more housing opportunities within this neighborhood. If the city, through its existing legislative process, rezones these properties in this manner, then following that, the city and Sobo Square would agree on a settlement agreement that is already arranged, and that document is public. And that's how this rezoning relates to the litigation. But I'd be happy to answer other questions you may have.
So is it fair to say if the city and Michael Cain were not in a lawsuit, this zoning would not be before us?
Well, I think gateway would certainly being discussed. This provided really a good opportunity for once we got in the same room. I think that's when some of these creative ideas to provide higher density, a pilot ordinance for higher density residential housing in this neighborhood. That's when that really started and progressed quickly between the owner of many of the properties within this area and the city. So yes, I think it would be fair to say that this particular zoning ordinance would not be in front of you, but a zoning change certainly would out there.
Okay, thank you.
Bill, any other questions for this deputy city attorney? Does anybody else have any questions for deputy city attorney? Thank you very much, Trevor. Yes, Bill.
So within the last few months, we've had three circumstances where the question has been, how do you interface between a more dense use and residential use? That's really the essence of the Hanover question. We had a discussion, a little bit of it in the context of the area between Daniel Street and Court Street, and now we have it here relative to this proposition and Osprey Landing. So the question is, how do you, in good zoning, how do you interface between more intense use and residential? It would seem that kind of what came out of the Hanover thing, at least in my mind, was that stepping down in height is a factor. Breaking up the mass was a factor there. And setbacks would seem to be a factor also. So if you look at the four easternmost of these properties, they interface with Osprey Landing, and there's a uniqueness in the in our process in that we don't see elevations of property. We just see flat land, and this is not flat land. There's a ridge that runs between Commerce, or between Portsmouth Street and Osprey Landing. So there's another 10 or 15, 20 feet of height at some points in there. So if we were to do this and extend it to those four properties that abut Osprey Landing, which is a marvelous working class neighborhood that's been in place for a long time, we could have 60-foot tall buildings on top of a 20-foot hill, 10 feet from the homes in Osprey Landing. So somewhere in here, there's some set of principles that we have to have that deal with how we transition following good zoning practices and not just butt them right up against it.
Yeah, Peter?
So there are standards for development sites that abut residential zones, and so in that scenario, they would have to have a 75-foot perimeter buffer from the residential district, the GRB.
So they could not build within 75 feet of Osprey Landing?
Right. There's a 75-foot perimeter buffer from residential district, mixed residential district, or CD4L1 for residential or mixed-use development.
So
that would apply.
So they could not build within 75 feet of Osprey Landing?
Right.
Okay.
Section is that?
That's the, for the development sites.
Can you pull up a map with the current uses?
And just so that it's clear, we, of course, can't do this. We make a recommendation to council. So we make, that's, you said if we did this, I just want to make it clear on the record that our job is to make a recommendation. Your point is well taken, just to trying to keep things clear here.
Right. Just the one in the memo is fine.
Okay.
I just want to put things in perspective.
How's that? Is it?
Yeah. I mean, to Bill's point, I'm sorry, Chair. I didn't ask to recognize. I just started talking. The abutting area between that and Osprey Landing has a hotel in that area of some quite tall hotel, and that ridge you're talking about. So I know when we do planning design, we don't consider that the building's never going to get torn down and reused. But I don't want to get too dug into an area that's probably the least likely to be developed in the next 5-10 years. It's probably going to be the area to the, assuming this map is pointed northwest, and northwest. And so I would like us to focus our efforts on that, and if that means excluding this or providing more protections in this area, I'm totally in favor of that. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater here.
Can you zoom in a little tighter?
Yeah.
To what some of us might think are sensitive.
Here, let me pull this. Let me just put the.
I know it. You get in too close.
I know,
It
sorry.
won't let you.
Throw the baby out with the bathwater. I've never heard that before.
You are so young.
Generational.
I know. It's a really generational wall down here.
I'm still thinking about it.
And the rest of us are laughing.
Come on.
I swear to God. I was deep in
We gotta
thought.
put a wall between
Andrew,
us.
have you heard of the Beatles?
He has fallen off the turnip truck.
I almost want to ask, has Trevor ever heard that?
Yeah, he is a much more expensive vernacular
He has a
than I
baby,
do.
so I think so.
That's right. They had to have heard it.
No babies, no bathwater. Oh, I'm sorry, Bill.
Yeah, so my understanding is that the area northeast of the Homewood Suites has no water problems, and it is owned by Kane. I don't know, I probably shouldn't even mention that, but so that to me is a very developable piece of land, and what rules would be applied there, we ought to take into account the Osprey Landing people. The stuff across Portsmouth Avenue is very developable, and I agree that that's probably where the first effort would be.
And Peter, you said it's 75 foot.
So, a perimeter buffer for 75 feet.
So basically,
So
the
that would-
hotel already has to be 75 feet away.
And is it currently wooded?
Partially.
Partially, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I comment on that?
It has
Yes.
sewer.
Andrew.
Regardless of how you feel about it, I think West End Yards probably serves as a maybe good litmus test here. We have single family directly abutting that. We have office abutting that. We have train tracks abutting that. And then now we have apartments and townhome style housing all within a cluster, not to mention the Button Factory that also abuts that. So while, yes, we can acknowledge the redevelopment opportunity with this home to suites, Osprey Landing is a mixed housing type of inventory. And I think by and large, this gateway language is directed at facilitating mixed housing. I think the design discretion that we're trying to get our heads around here, or at least I am, is that the hotel parcel would be maybe an intermediary between Osprey Landing and whatever type of multifamily housing or apartment building housing would go on the opposite side of Portsmouth Boulevard. So I find a little bit of comfort in it, and while I would absolutely agree with your statements, we don't want to eradicate existing communities to achieve something completely new and nascent. I have like this kind of vision in my head that it's this transitionary housing where you have Osprey Landing existing, and then maybe a hotel redevelopment at some point in the future, and then the other side of Portsmouth Boulevard. So I guess in my head, I'm creating a more tolerable image and softer landing for all of this. But again, I can see where your stance is.
I think to pick up on that a little bit too and answer some of your questions, Bill, it's about context, and the context of the Hanover Street project, it's much more of an urban context. This is more of a suburban context, so there's more space between the buildings, and there's more open space because of the wetlands that, going to be difficult to do anything about that. So there is and the other examples you gave are also more in town and in historic district as well. So context is super important, and this is it is acknowledged to be a leap to try to create more opportunities for higher density housing. It is that's the beginning, the genesis of this idea. So
I'm all in favor of developing this area, and I think it's a wonderful idea to do this. I just think we need to be conscious of how this interacts with on a big scale with the people right next door.
good point. Thank you. Yes, Jim.
Peter, would you mind focusing on the map and show where 1 Osprey Drive is, please?
Sure. All right, so I can comment on this. This parcel is really tied to the hotel. See how all this landscaping is part of the hotel's landscaping? I think that's why that was included, because it's really an extension of the hotel lot, even though it's a different zoning. You can see that it's basically their landscaping goes over onto that.
Okay, but it's a separate lot, and it's on the east side of Portsmouth Boulevard, and it's GRB now, and that's the only lot that I think is probably, if I was living there, I wouldn't appreciate all that could be done there.
With the setbacks, could anything be done there? I mean, how big is that?
Right. I mean, you'd have to have, well, if it was one building, you could.
I can do that.
Right. Sorry.
I was trying to see how big the lot was.
Oh, it's only
0.2.
0.2.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in a lot line revision or an assemblage type of notion,
Right, if they merge.
I see what Jim is saying.
But then you still, if it's part of a development site, you'd have a 75-foot buffer, which the lot is about 80 feet wide.
So you'd have a hard time
Yeah.
keeping that buffer.
Yes, Tony.
I think there's two aspects to this. There's the next to the Osprey Landing side, and then there's the other side, as I kind of said earlier. And I agree with Bill that I really would like to see the Osprey Landing side codified language where you go from single-family homes to, townhouse to, you build it up, multifamily. You're building up. I mean, that's what a planner or architects would do for a community, is they would have a blend up to go from a single-family home to some sort of commercial, even if it's residential mixed use. You'd have a blend. I'd like us to codify that as you switch from Dunlin down to Portsmouth Boulevard. That'd be my preference. And then I have questions and comments on the other area of this lot where I feel like we have this mission in the city to build more housing, yet we handcuff them with all these other requirements of pilots or incentives to do this, and if you do this, you're going to have to provide more land. It is so tenuous right now in the marketplace trying to build just market rate housing. We have approved market rate housing in the city that's not being built, and that's a sign of how tenuous it is. The market, trying to get banks to loan you money and all of that is very, very difficult. And so I think we're kind of kidding ourselves if we think we're gonna provide a carrot for them to build more and make it affordable. While it would be great, really we're just going to stop it at whatever line we have the affordable at. That probably is where they're going to stop it. If it's traditionally what's happened, it's going to happen now. It's just so hard to make it, and I would like to see us make an impact on the denominator. We have provide more housing in the community. We know that we need housing at every level, so it's not like we're leaving someone out by just putting market rate housing in. So I would like to push back on some of those additions on the area up near the plant. And then my last comment is I just checked the website, and they're shutting down the Granite Shore Power. They're shutting down that plant. It is unclear if they're going to shut down is both coal and wood. There's no power generation there. There might be power storage there, and they might do batteries, but there's going to 2025. There's no more power generation there, even peak power. So just for clarification on that. But that's where I'm at with the zoning ordinance. I don't like the restrictions that I think are just going to have a net reduction of what could be built here, and people in the community would be fine being built in that area. But I'd also like to see more protection for that Dunlin Road transition into Portsmouth Boulevard. That's it.
I need to understand one of your objections. Are you objecting to the bonus provisions, the optional bonus provisions?
Yes.
How do you feel about the base provisions without the? Do you think the base provisions are adequate to promote additional housing?
If we're comfortable with a bigger building, well, only because it's affordable, I think why aren't we just comfortable with a bigger building? We're trying to get more units in the city. I don't think the zoning ordinance is going to achieve the fact of getting as much units we can comfortably put on this site. I think it's going to artificially lower the number because that carrot of providing affordable housing, I don't think it's achieving the effect we want, because market rate housing is not happening right now at a rate that we want it to happen. It's just so hard to get done right now. So you say, hey, you can build more, but it's going to cost you more. They're just going to say, forget it. I'll just go back to the line. But if we were okay, if we're okay with people building these things, so say right now it's 4 and 5 story. You can do 4-story by right, 5-story by affordable. They're just going to stop at 4. Because it's just so hard to get that 5th story to be affordable. So just an example. And in my opinion, that's what I see what's happening in the city. And people are welcome to give me examples where that's not happening. I know there's a few rare circumstances, but that's usually when they're lucky and they get the 9% tax credit from the federal government. But those are like 8 handed out a year, and you have to have 44 units or less.
Would you help me understand? I don't want to say this a way that actually makes sense. You want us to have less restrictions, but don't you feel like the streamlining of the overlay district actually will give us more housing because it's going to be less strenuous? Like less conditional use permits for parking, allowing, certain things are being allowed by right. So I feel like one of the marching orders of, the Portsmouth Listens was, streamline things, make it easy, act on what, we've already all looked at. So I guess, don't you feel like some of the streamlining that this does would actually help what you're talking about? That's what I'm...
Yeah, yes. It'll be, the net result will be more housing in the community that'll be built because of the streamlining of this. But you're going to establish a precedent in an area that will, if they build 4-story units there, 4 stories is the precedent for decades. We have an opportunity here. Portsmouth land is so valuable to put a 4-story residential structure on this land where, I'm talking about the north portion, we have such an opportunity to allow more density.
So you want bigger?
Yes. If that wasn't clear, yes. Yes,
it was not totally clear.
Yeah. I'm thinking that we're giving these, if we're okay with a bigger building, we're already saying we're okay with a bigger building because we're willing to do it if they do affordable. And what my opinion is, which I may be wrong, my opinion is they're not going to do it, and so you're just going to get the lower thing than what we could have got.
What would you think if we pilot this for a period of time and then look at going bigger?
Well, I think you're going to establish a precedence. And so you're going to just naturally lower the ceiling of what could be here.
How would a pilot work in that sense?
Well, that's what we're basically considering this, and I don't know if Attorney McCourt would want to come and speak to the idea of doing a pilot is a test run, right? And we made it an overlay district so that we could lay it over it, and we're not actually changing the underlying zoning. And that way, if it does work, you can expand on it, and if it doesn't work, we can take it away, right?
Well, I can also help with that. It can be a formal pilot, but it could also be a let's do this and see what happens. And the first application that comes becomes the pilot. So if the first application is a 6 or 8 unit, 6 or 8 story building, I guess they worked. If we get an application that's all 4-story buildings, you were right. The bonuses didn't work. we could just initiate a change at that point.
And we have examples of that right now in this community. We have applications before this board that could go bigger, and they're not.
But I think, isn't part of the issue there, and you're the structural engineer and I'm not, isn't there an issue with
Over 5
going
stories.
from 4 to 5, you need to go up to 6 or 8 to make it economically viable for the...
I don't think that's true in Portsmouth, not when you're getting $4 a square foot.
I don't know, I'm asking...
No, I mean, it's 5 stories, you can do wood. Wood's the cheapest construction.
Okay.
And 5 stories are allowed by right here.
Without any zoning.
Correct. Without any,
Well,
right,
Public realm improvement,
public realm improvements.
but not workforce housing.
Right.
They have to do workforce housing.
No.
But they have to do public realm. That's what I'm saying. It's like, so we're like, hey, we want more housing, but let's reduce it.
What's the elevator code?
What do you mean?
What's the elevator code? Does the elevator code change over 5 stories? No.
Yeah.
You mean, all these buildings are going to need elevators? 3 stories need an elevator?
How many you need? Doesn't change?
Yeah, there's a capacity thing there, but that's not going to be the driving. That's another long sordid tale.
So, Tony, to support what you're talking about, why not also consider, if people know my frustration with fear of height, but, you know, when it comes to buildings, but within that 75-foot buffer against the abutting zone, why not allow construction in that 75 feet of 2 stories, of 3 stories? Why leave that entire 75-foot swath undevelopable? If height is the fear, that someone's going to have a 60-foot tall building 10 feet away from a 2-story building, why not allow 2-story buildings to be next to 2-story buildings within that 75 feet?
That's a different approach.
Right.
And,
It's just introducing some more density.
It is.
Onto the land to gain more housing.
Yeah, I guess I'm in fully support of that, but I'm also, I mean, if we were trying to move this thing forward, we can come back and revisit these things, these pieces.
Right, I
I'm
think
fine
that's
with
the
that.
other reality here. Could you bring up that aerial? Peter, do you have that handy? To your point about the transition, if you're going along a street or down streets into a different neighborhood, much like Hanover, we do look at transitions from a planning perspective. But to my point earlier that I made, when you look at the back of buildings, you've got those buildings on Osprey that front on that street there where Peter's indicating. We've got the hotel that fronts on the other street. So any big buildings on the hotel, the property of the hotel, will be essentially backing up to the backs of those buildings on the other part of whatever the heck that street's called that parallels Portsmouth Boulevard. So that is consistent with the way zoning classically done. You classically change it at the rear lot line. So that is consistent with that. If we were proposing down the street, to Jim's point earlier, in that other little lot, if that were a developable lot, it doesn't seem like it is because it's so small, there's a reason maybe to consider that one differently because it's on the street. It's much like the historic district question we had earlier. The frontage of that, we were making it conform with the frontage of the lots next to it. So I'm not troubled by that change.
The last house on Dunlin, on the north side of Dunlin, I'm thinking of the property to the left of that.
This one?
To the north west of that.
This one?
Right there. Yeah, exactly.
Up there.
The pizza slice.
It is kind of a pizza slice. I didn't think of
Tony, when you say you're thinking about it, what do you mean?
Well, that's where I think that I agree with you. Your sentiment on the south side because it's the back lot line. There, if you're driving down that street, and you got single family, then all of a sudden, the 75-foot gap in a taller building, it's strange. I think that you should have single family townhouses or row houses
Gradually build up.
and then gradually build up.
Within that 75 feet.
Right.
Well, we have to make a decision of whether we want to tinker or whether we want to proceed and try to figure out what to do with what happens next. Having worked on a whole bunch of zoning ordinances over the years, I know it can never stop, depending on how much you want to do. So these are all good points, but yes, Andrew?
Is this an opportunity to ask a couple other clarifying questions?
Sure.
Section 8 of 10.683.1. Section 8 says the development within the GNOD may include multiple lots owned or controlled by the same person or entity and assembled for a GNOD development, and it can contain more than one principal building. We then go on to say in 10.685 about parking, where shared parking shall apply and be permitted on separate lots, whether in common ownership or separate ownership without the requirement of a CUP. Are those contradictory, or I know that some sort of agreements would be in place, but doesn't a CUP allow us to have some control over that?
Well, shared parking, you have to demonstrate that you can share it, so there'd have to be the demonstration of an agreement. I think that was the thinking on the shared parking
And
aspect.
there is a requirement for a recorded agreement.
Okay. Yeah, as long as there's some mechanism and triggering point. Go ahead, Beth.
Well, you still do site plan review. So they would have to produce what their plan was.
Right.
We just don't have a right to say whether or not they can use shared parking or not, right? We're just saying, show us what your plan is as part of site plan. So, but they get to do it by a right. Does that make sense?
Okay. And then are we going to eventually further define in 10.684 the allowed uses? Are those going to be further defined within a zoning table or a zoning and uses table?
The bold uses are defined. Which ones were you thinking?
Assisted living, I think, is a pretty interesting one, specifically to a previous housing committee that we just sat in, and incorporating maybe different aged different aged housing and targeted housing. So that's kind of a thought there, and density and how that's all broken up. Co-living is a current concept on the table, but also assisted living, I think, is regulated differently in units count or bedroom count. And then retail sales conducted within a building, I think there are still some conditions or restricted uses or constraints to retail sales. Same with restaurants and personal services. Don't those all have further definitions that
Would be in the
The
code.
uses are defined, and I just went through this in another community. In New Hampshire, if you use a term like assisted living that isn't defined in your ordinance, you first look to the dictionary and then you look to common usage. So,
We have two types of assisted living facilities. We have assisted living center and assisted living home.
With their size different, right?
Right. I think it's the number of people. But
and under the heading of assisted living facility.
right. So, as written, this to me says that both of those will be permitted.
Okay. Yeah.
If you certainly can make recommendations on if you want to limit restaurant size. We have different categories for that use.
It could match Gateway 2 versus Gateway 1 sizing.
Right. If that were the case, it would allow up to 500 by special exception.
Seats.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I could have started this statement with, I'm in favor of all of these things. It's just a function of if you want to achieve the true spirit of the Gateway and you want to have a combined neighborhood, having a further definition of some of these things, I think would allow a developer to have this more creative mindset to say, oh, I can now add my restaurant, I can add the retail sales, much like you see in a more urban setting in cities around the country. And so those are my curiosities and how I'm kind of beginning to envision this.
Is your concern that the developer might choose just to do a big restaurant?
Yes, or just one retail store where we want, this is a pretty substantial amount of land that we're talking about, and if done in a pure concept in a perfect world, I think you get a variety of these things, and maybe there's a percentage of the development that goes towards certain uses or a mixed use aspect of it, and I know that that's obviously within our consideration, but if the hope is to achieve a neighborhood that people want to spend time in and that they don't have to get into a car and go elsewhere, then now you begin to talk about adding a minimum or a baseline of these things? Like the 4/1 concept that you would see in a downtown city?
Is the concern freestanding retail and restaurants? If the restaurants and retail were in a building that otherwise had housing?
Maybe not freestanding, but isolated. So if it's just one convenience store in the sea of otherwise multifamily housing, maybe I'm not understanding something correctly.
Well, that's a question of scale.
Yeah.
So
We have a lot of
there's
scale.
two issues. There's scale, and then there's, I think one of the comments of the public hearing was freestanding retail, which, under the existing office research, is freestanding retail.
It's not permitted.
Isn't it really a matter of if you're going to have that many people living in what could be very large residential buildings, they're going to want amenities right there, within their reach.
You're not going to do single-story lots.
What's that?
They're not going to do single-story lots.
They'd be on the ground floor of the
Single-story
building.
buildings, no.
Right, no, I'm thinking of the Tuscan Village model in Salem,
Right.
where if none of you, if you haven't been, you have to go, because it's everything you can want in, those acres right there. You don't have to leave.
Yeah,
I
so
want Portsmouth. I want Portsmouth.
I guess, yeah, the cliche is a 4/1. One floor of retail, restaurant, mixed use on the ground floor, and then 4 stories of living upstairs. You see that, again, in a lot of urban settings. So if we want to achieve that or that type of orientation, I just want to have that kind of envisioned and incorporated into this language so that that is what we get instead of the one single convenience store, the one isolated retail event.
Well, what you just said would be a modification to retail and restaurant being the ground floor of an otherwise residential building.
Mm-hmm.
I think, if I may,
Yeah.
I think, there's a lot of things that are probably a part 2 review of this, and there's a part 1 of being okay with what we've got now to get started. The reality is of mandating mixed use on that first floor. They're pro formas to do that. They're just the banks are going to say you're going to have to assume it's empty, because that's the reality of commercial space right now, is it's empty. And so I think a percentage of it, it'd be fine with, but I think that's going to take some time to bake that correctly. We're not going to do that tonight with getting the right numbers, but saying, hey, a certain amount of your buildings and a certain floor percentage have to be retail, I'd be totally fine with that. But I don't think we're going to get there tonight.
Beth and Paul.
Paul can go first.
My question really is about the recommendation to council, and if necessary, I'll make a motion to open discussion up on that. If it's not necessary,
It is necessary.
it is.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'll make the motion that we vote to recommend to City Council to hold their second reading on the proposed Gateway Neighborhood Overlay District zoning amendments.
Second.
Now, would you like to continue with the discussion, or was that your?
Right, so now we can just discuss what is on the agenda, because it seems like we're, there's questions of, are we properly incentivizing? And there's questions, we're getting very granular on some of the potential things that we might see in this. By allowing council to have a second reading on it, right, and putting it in the council's agenda, and giving the public an opportunity to address council with their concerns about it, might be the right next course of action for this particular item. It seems like there's more work to be done here, right?
It was kind of where I was going to go with my comments is, if I've learned anything in my 12 now years on this board, working with zoning, I remember when we were looking at the ADUs the first time, we spent so much time in work sessions getting into the granular pieces of it. And at some point, you just have to say, let's put something on the books, let's give it a try, and what doesn't work, we can then change. And that was one of the reasons why this board actually kept ADUs as a conditional use permit in front of the planning board. We could have given it to the ZBA. It was a choice, right? It could have been a special exception. It could have been other things. We chose to keep it because we really wanted to see how it works. Well, this is going to be our next opportunity to see how this works. And if we move forward what's here now and kind of do get to see how it works, we can then talk about changes in the future and tweak it to the way that we think it will most likely operate.
Joe had his.
In other words, what we're saying is we, whether all of us or most of us or some of us like the direction we're going, let's accept the baseline. And because a lot of the comments we're making are ways to improve the base scope, right?
Refinements.
So I agree with the motion to keep it moving forward, and as long as we have the opportunity to continue input and fine tune it.
Yeah, I guess I would add is maybe we ask.
Speak up closer to your microphone, sorry.
We asked the council, would they like us to, assuming we vote to approve this tonight, I know it might be a big assumption, but we also asked the council, would they like us to look at this in further detail and see if we can provide more density or other improvements other than density, retail or whatnot.
Andrew.
I have a great deal of respect for your tenure here on this board and the city council. I just don't know if I agree with the sentiment of let's see what happens and let's see what we get. And I know that we've done that as a city in the past with other zoning regulations, and I'm not sure that it has produced the exact thing that we are sitting here discussing. It has produced something wildly different and something that we have then gone back to change. And so I don't want to lose out on the opportunity to rezone in a near perfect manner what is such a significant portion of land with seemingly a motivation to get it where we want it to go. So my concerns are not so much with the concept, but more so the let's see what we get, because that does not produce a high quality product when economic conditions are the way that they are.
I get your point. I'd like to add, this isn't something that was conceived of this afternoon at 2 o'clock.
I entirely get that too.
And it just hasn't had any thought. So, it's not slapdash.
Nope, I never considered that because I know that it goes through a lot of avenues to reach this.
The other
exact
thing that's
spot.
different with the city as opposed to towns get to do this once a year unless they have a special town meeting. And the city, as a city, you can do it as often as the council wants to address it. So that, to Beth's point, it is different in the few cities we have in the state.
Just to let everybody know, it is already on the council's agenda, and I have it under my name to bring back a verbal report regarding our discussion, our conversations, things that we'd like to see. So I've been taking notes as far as if there's something you really want me to tell council, please tell me now, and I'm happy to write it down and add it to my many notes.
Can we email that to you, or does it have to be in the public forum?
You can email it to me as long as you get it to me no later than like Monday morning.
Cool.
Because meeting is Monday night.
Yeah.
Bill?
At the risk of being granular, I'd like to ask if we could add childcare as a allowed use. We're really not putting in any recreation requirement, any free space. We're letting the planning manager or planning director decide, or with our suggestions as to what that would be. I'm a little uncomfortable with that, but maybe we can't go there. And it does add cost if we go there, but we're not making a walkable neighborhood. We're not having a place to play. We're leaving the fates of economy to drive where it goes. I'd like, if we are going to send this forward, I'd like to either now or in the future be more specific about the protections, the step down relative to the surrounding neighborhood.
Okay.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I fortunately can't support the motion, not because I don't agree with the concept. It's a no-brainer around the nation. Commercial space is dead. The United States, throughout all the cities, are changing commercial to residential. I get it. It's a good use. So I don't have a problem with what's being done. I have a problem with how it's being done. I think city planning by lawsuit is not a good idea. 10 of these 16 properties are owned by Michael Kane. Attorney McCourt confirmed we wouldn't be here if we weren't in a lawsuit. This is part of a settlement. And therefore, for all those reasons, again, it's not what's being done, it's how it's being done. I can't support the motion.
Okay, well, you're certainly entitled to your opinion. I think, as I said in one of the earlier meetings, I think it was the first meeting, we have to look at this on its own merit. The way it started was as part of the mediation, as Attorney McCourt mentioned, but it has to go through the standard administrative process, which is this meeting, the meeting we had before, and the council's 2 succeeding meetings before it can become a zoning amendment. So how it started is exactly a part of the mediation that came about from the catalyst, actually, because it started really with the Land Use Committee, and it even came up when we were talking about the gateway changes. As you probably remember, I think it was an attorney for one of the landowners in this area who suggested we do this. So it's not a brand new idea. And I'm not going to argue about it. I just wanted to make it clear that,
Right.
that there has been, other discussion about this.
But I just think it sets a bad precedent for the city. I'm afraid other developers are watching us tonight. They want their zoning changed, sue the city and have a zoning change as part of the settlement.
I'm not concerned about that.
Chairman?
But,
Sorry.
Deputy, you'd like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say one thing very clearly for the record is that this zoning ordinance change, this proposed amendment, is in no way a part of the settlement agreement. It is not a term of the settlement agreement. Settlement agreements are structured, you shall do this, and we shall do that, and then we shall settle the case. This is not one of those terms. This is something that we have agreed to explore as the litigation is stayed. And if this does not pass, then litigation will resume, but there'll be no further damages on the part of any party. I just wanted to state that very clearly for the record, although it's not relevant to the legislative process you are pursuing.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate Jim's comments, which is why I made the motion, so we can have this discussion. But what I would ask is what is the alternate course of action then for the board tonight?
As opposed to your motion?
Yes.
Well, the alternate course would be not to recommend it. And then the board could choose to propose its, changes to something different, differently, or to change this one. Board is free to do what it thinks is what it wants to do. I think this is ready to be advanced myself, but
I would just wanted to, I agree with Bill's comments. I wanted to make the amendment to allow childcare. So I propose an amendment to allow childcare as an approved use in this area.
one of the allowed uses.
Are you okay with that? Paul made the motion.
I didn't make the motion.
I'm okay with that.
Who seconded it? I don't remember.
It
Tony
was Tony
seconded.
seconded it.
Okay.
He seconded the motion, he
So-
made the amendment,
all
I
right.
approved the amendment, and he's going to second the amendment approval.
Is the
What he
board
said.
ready to vote on the motion with the amendment? More discussion.
So could I just ask too, Peter earlier talked about Lafayette, and in the flow of this discussion, this being something that will look like this that we would do somewhere else, I would suggest that the process by which future things will be approved should revert to the standards for the planning board's role if we do take this to further geographies.
Okay. Any other? I don't want to force anything here, but
I'm ready to vote.
I'm ready to vote.
we have a motion, second. It has been amended to include childcare as one of the additional allowed uses. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries. I believe that is it, correct?
You had a couple updates? Or?
Oh, we have upcoming meeting dates. Yeah. So we have, because we have more zoning things to talk about, there's a work session tentatively scheduled 1 week from tonight in conference room
Hey, Counselor May.
A.
Yep.
Board members able to make that?
24th?
School, it's not in the school board room?
No, they had
It's
actually
switched.
held conference room A for us, so I thought we were
Day is that?
24th?
I am
Thursday?
not present.
Of October.
next Thursday.
Oh,
7 p.m.
6 p.m.
I am not.
Peter, Joe and I are no's.
I'm going to be in.
You're now?
I am not available.
You're not available? You are?
I'm good.
Paul? Bill? Jim?
Yep, good.
What's this meeting?
In conference room A. It's a continued
It's a work
discussion
session.
of the
It's just a work
co-housing and the Hanover.
Yeah.
Talking about
that
more
we-
other zoning.
And then we have,
I can be there.
I think folks know this, on the 12th and the 18th, we have joint meetings with the council. Actually, the 18th is a joint public hearing with council, and then our regular meeting on the 21st.
Yeah, because we have a city council meeting on the 18th.
And the planning board is supposed to be there on the 12th, correct?
Correct.
And the 18th,
That's a
yeah.
joint
And
work
the
session.
18th, okay. If there's nothing else, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.